A popular software like Slack has hundreds of integrations: GitHub, Jira, Zoom, Google Calendar, and each one of these plugs into Slack without the Slack team writing a single line of code for it. That is extensibility. Meanwhile, thousands of engineers across different teams ship to Slack every week without stepping on each other's toes or accidentally breaking what's already there. That is maintainability. These are two different qualities, both designed in from the start, and both of these are invisible when done well and extremely painful when they're not done properly. In this video, we're going to go deep on both of them. We'll cover cohesion and coupling, which are the two forces that determine how maintainable a system is at the code and architecture level. We'll talk about interfaces as contracts, API versioning, database schema evolution, feature flags, the strangler fig pattern, event-driven extensibility, and why the decisions you made 3 years ago are often harder to read than the code itself. We'll have plenty of diagrams. It's a very visual video, so stick around till the end. So first, let's understand the distinction between extensibility and maintainability properly. Imagine you're working on a payment service at a fintech company. You need to add support for a new payment provider, let's say Razorpay, alongside the existing Stripe integration. Extensibility is what determines how hard that is going to be. If your system was designed to be extended, adding Razorpay means writing a new adapter class and then plugging it in, and that's it, it's done. If it wasn't, then you'll have to modify the core payment flow, you'll have to touch business logic that handles money, and you'll have to hope that nothing breaks. Now imagine that 6 months later, a bug is found in the fee calculation logic. Maintainability is what determines how hard that fix is going to be. If the logic is clean, isolated, well named and tested, someone will fix it in an hour. If the fee calculation is scattered across multiple files, mixed into unrelated business logic with no tests and comments that describe what the code used to do, then that fix is a 2-day investigation followed by 3 days of anxiety about what else might have broken. So there are two different concerns. Extensibility is about the future, how easily can the system grow. Maintainability is about the present, how easily can the system be understood and changed. A system can be highly extensible, but it can be a mess to maintain. A system can be clean and maintainable, but can be totally rigid. The best systems are both maintainable and extensible. Now here's something interesting to know. Engineers spend far more time reading code than writing it. Research consistently puts the ratio somewhere between 5 and 10 to 1. For every hour you spend writing new code, you spend 5 to 10 hours reading existing code, understanding what it does, tracing a bug, figuring out where to make a change, and so on. Which means the primary cost of software is not building it, it's actually maintaining it. The building part happens once, the maintaining part happens for years. By the way, this video is part of the System Design for Beginners playlist. It has more than 50 videos. If you haven't gone through the playlist, make sure you check out the videos because it'll help you build a strong foundation in system design. Alright. So here, when you make a design decision that saves you an hour now, but makes the code harder to understand later, you're making a trade that looks good today and compounds badly over time. Maintainability is a discipline of making that trade consciously, not accidentally. And extensibility is the other side of that. Requirements always change. New payment providers are always there. There are new notification channels, new pricing tiers to be added, new regions for the product to be released in. A system that was built assuming its requirements were final is a system that's going to cost you enormous amounts of time to change when and not if those requirements change. Extensibility is designing for the changes you don't know about yet. So the mental model for this entire video is maintainability asks, if I need to change this, how much of the system do I have to understand and touch to do it safely? Whereas extensibility asks, if I need to add something new, can I do it without modifying what already works? Every technique in this video is a way to answer yes to one or both of these questions. Keep that in mind as we go. Now let's start with the two most fundamental concepts in software maintainability: cohesion and coupling. Cohesion is about how well the things inside a module belong together. A highly cohesive module does one thing, and all the code inside it exists to serve just that one thing. A payment service that handles payment processing, like creating charges, refunds, invoices, is highly cohesive. But a payment service that also sends emails, or manages user profiles and generates reports is not cohesive because the stuff inside it does not belong together. Coupling is about how connected different modules are to each other. Loose coupling means a module can do its job without knowing much about the internals of other modules. Tight coupling means a change in one module requires changes in several other modules. The goal is always high cohesion and loose coupling. Every module should do one thing really well and know as little as possible about how other modules work. Now, these two ideas sound simple, but almost every maintainability problem you encounter in a real code base is a violation of one or both of these. A service that does too many things has low cohesion. A service that calls 10 other services directly and knows their internal structure is tight coupling. When you're reading a system and it feels hard to understand or scary to change, it's almost always because cohesion is low, coupling is high, or both. Let's go deeper on coupling because it shows up in a few different forms that are worth naming separately. The most dangerous kind is data coupling, or more specifically, coupling through a shared database. Two services, both writing to the same database table. This seems convenient, but it's a maintenance nightmare. If you need to change the schema of that table, rename a column, or split it into two different tables, change the data type, now you have to coordinate the change across every service that touches it. The services are tightly coupled through the database, even if they don't call each other directly. The next kind is implementation coupling. Service A calls service B, but instead of calling a clean interface, it depends on the internal structure of B's response. For example, which fields are in which nested object and the exact error codes that B returns, or the order of items in a list itself. If B's team refactors their internals, A will break. A is coupled to B's implementation and not just its contract. The third kind is temporal coupling. Service A calls service B synchronously and waits. If B is slow, A is slow. If B is down, A can't complete its operation. A's availability is now tied to B's. We'll come back to how event-driven architecture breaks this kind of coupling later in the video. Knowing what kind of coupling you have tells you what kind of change will break things and where the maintenance burden lives. Now, before we continue, I want to take a few seconds and tell you about the Algoroq cohort, which is a live cohort that I personally teach to 10 to 15 engineers in one single cohort. The reason that this exists is because there are many cohorts for junior engineers, but none that exist for senior engineers. Basically for people who already know the basics of architecture and system design and are wanting to build next generation production software in the post-AI world. So this is a 12 weeks program, and we cover topics like advanced system design, AI native system design, architecture for the post-AI world, and tips and tricks to using AI coding tools, but all of this from a senior engineering perspective. I'm planning the next cohort around mid or end of May 2026. This is going to be my third cohort, so I wanted to go through the algoroq.io website, which is algoroq.io, and I want you to check out these topics that we are going to cover. If you like the topics, I want you to fill up the form that opens up when you hit the enroll button. Once you fill up the form, I'll check to see if you're a great fit, and then we'll set up a call with you. It's about $2,500 for the entire cohort, and I teach it personally. But if you just wanted access to pre-recorded cohort videos, that'll be $800. Once you fill up the form, you can also talk to people who have attended the cohort previously and decide if you then want to go ahead or not. Now let's get back to the video. So how do you actually achieve loose coupling in practice? The primary tool for this is interfaces. An interface is a contract. It says, here is what I can do for you, here are the inputs I expect, and here are the outputs I guarantee. It says nothing about how I do it internally. When service A depends on an interface rather than a concrete implementation, it means you can swap out what's behind that interface without A knowing or caring. You can change the database from Postgres to MySQL. You can also swap the payment provider from Stripe to Razorpay. You can add caching in front of a slow API call. All of this happens behind the interface. The service A doesn't need to change anything at all. And this is the open-closed principle in a sentence. Your modules should be open to extension, but closed to modification. You extend behavior by adding new implementations of existing interfaces. You don't modify the existing code that works. Let's take a real example. Your notification service sends emails. Tomorrow, let's say the product team wants SMS as well. If your code is written against a notification sender interface, you add a new SMS sender class that implements that interface. The rest of the system does not have to change. It just gets a new implementation plugged in. That's it. That's the whole idea. The interface is what makes the system extensible without touching what already works. Now, if you want to see actual code examples of how to build with interfaces and how to build extensible and maintainable software, then I've built more than 60 projects in Golang in a playlist called Golang projects. Make sure you check out the projects that are at the end because those most definitely have interfaces. Now let's talk about this concept called API versioning, which will have its own video later on in the series, but for now, we'll try to understand it from a 10,000 feet perspective. Because API versioning is where extensibility meets external contracts. When you build an API that other teams or external developers use, you've made a promise. The fields in your response, the shape of your request, the behavior of each endpoint, your consumers are basically built on top of that promise. If you change it, you break them. But the reality is that requirements change. You need to rename a field, you need to add a required parameter, you need to remove something that's no longer relevant. So how do you evolve an API without breaking everyone who depends on it? The answer is versioning combined with backward compatibility tools. Backward compatible changes are changes you can make without incrementing the version. If you add a new optional field to a response, it's safe and existing consumers ignore it. Similarly, if you add a new optional request parameters, that's also safe. Existing calls can still work. And then you can also add a new endpoint entirely, which is also safe and nobody is forced to use it. Breaking changes require a version increment. For example, removing a field, renaming renaming a field, changing a field's type, making an optional parameter required. Any of these break existing consumers. So you introduce v2 of the endpoint alongside v1, you keep v1 running, and you give consumers time to migrate and eventually deprecate it. The discipline here is versioning from day one. If you ship version 1 of your API without thinking about versioning, the day you need to make a breaking change becomes a painful coordinated migration. If you version from the start, evolution is very predictable. Okay, so we learned about extensibility for APIs, but what about databases? Because databases is where things get very painful. Your API can have multiple versions. Your database only has one schema. And every service that touches the database has to agree on what the schema looks like at any given moment. When the schema changes, the services have to change too, and they might not all be deployed at the same time. This is the schema evolution problem, and there's a specific pattern for dealing with it. It's called expand and contract. The expand phase is backward compatible. You add new columns, new tables, new indexes. You never remove or rename anything yet. New code writes to the new columns. Old code keeps reading and writing the old columns. Both coexist and there's no breakage. Then all the services migrate to using the new schema. Once you're confident nothing is reading the old columns anymore, you've instrumented this, you're sure, you enter the contract phase. You remove the old columns, the old tables, the old indexes, and you clean up. It's very simple in theory, but in practice, the contract phase gets skipped constantly. Engineers do the expand, they migrate the code, and they never come back to clean up. Over time, the database accumulates columns from 3 years of abandoned schema migrations that nobody's sure are still used. And that's a maintainability problem. The schema is now harder to understand than it needs to be. The next underrated extensibility tool are called feature flags. A feature flag is a configuration value that controls whether a piece of code runs. You deploy the code, but the behavior feels off. So you turn it on for 1% of users, and then to 10% of the users, and then everyone. Or you turn it off if something goes wrong without deploying a rollback. And that's the basic idea, but the extensibility use case is slightly different. Feature flags let you decouple deployment from release. You can ship code for a half-built feature to production behind a flag before it's ready. The code is there, but it's not active yet. So you keep adding to it. When it's ready, you flip the flag. This matters for maintainability because it removes the long-running feature branch problem. Long-lived branches are a maintenance nightmare. They drift from main, merge conflicts pile up, integration bugs accumulate. Feature flags let you merge small increments continuously, keep main always deployable, and control what's actually live through configuration rather than code. It also matters for extensibility because flags give you a clean way to introduce behavioral changes without removing the old behavior immediately. So old behavior is still there behind a flag, but new behavior is on for users that you're testing with. You can roll forward or backward without a deploy. Now let's talk about the strangler fig pattern, which is one of the most important patterns for extending and replacing legacy systems. The name actually comes from a type of vine that grows around an existing tree. Over time, the vine wraps the tree completely. The tree dies and the vine is left standing in the tree's shape. The old structure is gradually replaced by the new one from the outside in. In software, the problem it solves is this. You have a legacy system that's hard to maintain and impossible to extend. Maybe it's a monolith with years of tangled code. Maybe it's a third-party system that you can't modify, but you want to replace it with something modern. But you can't just rewrite the whole thing because the rewrite would take 2 years. The business cannot stop during that time, and big bang rewrites fail constantly. So this is where we use the strangler fig pattern because it says don't rewrite but incrementally strangle. You put a routing layer in front of the legacy system, new features go into the new system, and existing functionality stays in the legacy system initially. One by one, you move pieces of the legacy system into the new one. The routing layer sends each request to wherever that piece now lives. Over time, the new system handles more and more. The legacy system handles less and less. Eventually, you delete the legacy system and remove the routing layer. The key insight here is that two systems can coexist, the legacy system and the modern system, and you slowly replace the legacy system with the modern system. One of the most powerful extensibility tools in modern architecture is event-driven design. And the reason it's so good for extensibility comes down to one thing. The producer does not know who is consuming. So here's a scenario. You have an order service. When an order is placed, you need to send a confirmation email, update the inventory, charge the payment, and log the order for analytics. The tightly coupled way to build this is the order service calls the email service, calls the inventory service, calls the payment service, calls the analytics service, and so on. So that's 4 direct dependencies. If you had a new thing that should happen when an order is placed, say a loyalty point service, you modify the order service. The event-driven way for this is when an order is placed, the order service publishes an order placed event to a message bus. That's it. The order service is done. It doesn't know or care who's listening. The email service can subscribe to that event and send the email. The inventory service can subscribe to that event and update its stocks. The payment service can subscribe to that event and charge the user, and so on. That's the extensibility win. So that's highly extendable. So new behavior is added by just adding new consumers, and you don't have to modify the producer at all. But there's a tiny trade-off. The systems become harder to trace. So when an order is placed, what happens. You have to look at every subscriber to know what's exactly happening. So observability becomes more important, but generally for extensibility, being event-driven is one of the strongest patterns available. Now let's also talk about plugin architectures, which are the extreme end of extensibility and worth understanding because they show up a lot. A plugin architecture is one where the core system defines extension points, which are specific places where third-party or independently developed code can plug in and change behavior. And new capabilities are added by just writing plugins rather than by modifying the core. For example, your browser is a plugin architecture. The core browser renders pages, handles HTTP, and manages tabs, whereas extensions plugins add new behavior like ad blocking, password management, tab grouping, and so on. VS Code that you use is plugin architecture as well. The core handles file editing, but every language feature like syntax highlighting for Rust, debuggers for Go, linters for Python, all of that are plugins. So plugin architecture is highly extendable, but the cost is complexity. You have to design the extension points carefully because once external code depends on them, they're hard to change. Let's finally talk about technical debt because it's the thing that accumulates when maintainability is ignored, and most explanations of it are too vague to be useful. Technical debt has a specific meaning. It's code that works today but is harder to change than it should be. It's not broken code, but it's working code that's poorly structured, poorly named, and poorly tested, or makes implicit assumptions that are no longer true. The word debt is useful because debt has two components, principal and interest. The principal is the cleanup work that you would need to do to fix it. The interest is the extra time that every future change costs you because the debt is there. A badly named variable is small debt, low interest. The real problem is large-scale structural debt, like a service that grew to handle responsibilities it was never designed for, or a data model that made sense in year one but doesn't reflect the domain anymore, or a module that 6 teams all touch and nobody fully understands. So the discipline here to fix technical debt is to make debt visible. Whenever you take a shortcut, write it down, create a ticket, note it in a comment, make the debt legible and visible so that future engineers know that it exists. Alright, so we've understood maintainability and extensibility from multiple different angles. We have done deep dives into both of the topics, and I hope you understand them really well. Creating these diagrams is extremely hard, and making these videos is extremely time consuming. So make sure you share this video with your friends, you like this video, you subscribe to this channel, and you comment on the video if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.